Hey there folks, it is 5:57 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is January the 12th in the year that we're told, 2024. So the reason for making this video today, it's a little bit, goes back to a post that I just did recently on Facebook, where I was just illustrating the inconsistency of this ubiquitous mud flood narrative amongst the also ubiquitous Tartarian narrative and ubiquitous reset narrative. And it gets so dicey, and I would say for good reason. Dicey, which of course I've addressed the reset diciness as far as applying terms. And the funny thing is, all these people out there that have the most influence as far as through websites, website groups, social media groups, and then of course video media platforms, they all keep using the same terminology over and over again, while in the same breath denying that they're all using the same terminology to get us locked in to a certain headspace, to get us locked into a certain narrative. They all keep using the same terminology, and at the same time, they all keep denying that they're all reading from the same script. And it's suspicious. And some of these points that they try to sell us are far more suspicious, far weaker, and are going to make you look... I'm trying to not use a word like dumber, but there's no way you're going to start making any kind of arguments to anyone who has some kind of a good grasp of engineering, civil engineering, soil science, building construction. You're going to sound stupid. You're going to sound really stupid. And as with any other rollout, which this whole Tartarian mud flood reset-y thing has all of the earmarks of being, they always insert narratives that are really bad. Really bad. And, I don't always know the reason for every narrative. I don't. But oftentimes, we're not going to. Because we weren't there in the little secret meetings and the think tanks where they figured out what they wanted to roll out, what they were hoping to accomplish, and what would be the points and sub-points that they would have their people focus on. We weren't there, so we don't know for sure. All we can do is point out what's wrong with what is being presented. You don't have to know. This is an old tactic that it's a foil. It's a ruse. It is a red herring. When people try to say, well, why would they do this? Well, there could be various reasons, and we could speculate on those various reasons, but you don't necessarily have to know the why in order to point out what's wrong with a thing, what's wrong with a narrative, what's wrong with an idea. You don't always have to have the positive model in order to point out all the negatives in the current model. Because there could be too many factors present, or potential factors present, in the popular or current going model that you don't yet currently see because you don't have the perspective. But what you do have is maybe a set of common sense and reasoning skills that you should apply to anything, especially when that narrative is presented to you in mockingbird form, like these main big narratives that these Tartarian mud flood resetters, these and they come up with a million different names, and there's a reason for that. They will tell you they're not connected and this is not one movement, but then in the same breath they'll call it a community. It's doublespeak. That's all these people do, is practice in doublespeak. I would not have you deceived. I would like to see you critically examine, especially the material that you get from so-called alternatives to the establishment narrative, especially when they're all speaking in tandem. So before I start on that, I do want to one more time, look, if you want to know what the truth far more likely is about what's going on, why things don't add up, why things don't add up in our world, in reality, why things don't add up regarding what they tell us about history, civilization, the history of buildings and infrastructure, specifically having to do with North America, but this regards the whole world. Why things don't add up in the Bible, why the language doesn't add up in the Bible. Get my book, The Bible versus the Middle East, Volume 1, with indications of the true promised land. It's at Amazon because a guy who doesn't have much money like myself, this is one of the most easy and instant ways that I can publish a finished book. So it is there right now, and it's $40 for the paperback. You can buy the Kindle for $30, or if you're part of Kindle Unlimited, you can just read as much as you want. You can contact me as well on other mediums that I sell the book directly in. You contact me through the email address in the description. Then there is also my Patreon, and there's a lot there. I release an audio every week, Friday morning. The newest audio of The Rise and Fall of Great Powers by Paul Kennedy. It's a reading with commentary, was just released at 6 a.m. this morning. That comes every week. Well, The Great Powers comes every other week, and then every other week is Let's Consider the Book of Matthew. I just started releasing in article form, little by little, we'll be releasing the English translation of The Falsification of the History of Early Christianity by Wilhelm Kammeier, as well as a new series in video, Finding the Bible, where we examine the wording in the Bible to see if it is in fact correct, if it's grammatically correct, syntactically correct, if the vocabulary is right, why it isn't right, if it's not right, maybe it's right. We look at prefixes, suffixes, all of that stuff that we need to look at to determine whether or not we're actually being told what the Bible said in the first place. So there's a lot to get over at the Patreon, and this is how you could support me, because I'm trying all the time and every day, trying to bring you the best, most purified form of all the truth that I've gained in all my years of doing this. So your support means a whole lot, and it helps a whole lot. So I appreciate it. So today we're going to look at the claims of John Levi. The reason that we're going to look at Levi and his specific particular video, Our Buried Past, the Mud Flood, is because Levi is based on the numbers that we can see at his channel, over 300,000 subscribers. This video alone to like 250,000 views. Whether or not those metrics are accurate, they are telling us that he is remarkably influential. So we're going to take a look at him. He is simply reflecting what a lot of other platforms, a lot of other voices out there in many different media types are saying. Okay, they say it's not one narrative. They say they don't have certain words that they're trying to push, and in the next breath they do that very thing. So, in this video, for reasons, I suppose, Levi begins at Easter Island, which I would say, for starters, is a really terrible mix of what we might be talking about in civilization and in cities, urban areas, as compared to rural areas, because the reasons for phenomenon are going to be different between the two. So what Easter Island has to do with this, I'm not sure. And I would say Easter Island's a very bad example of, if we're talking about mud flood, for a few reasons. One thing, its remoteness. It is very remote, and not just anyone has the money to hop on a plane and take another boat out to Easter Island and examine whatever seems to be going on over there. Are we to believe? Of course, he spends very little time on this, but he does say he thinks that these figures here look like columns, that could be columns built to support some enormous structure around it. Who knows if that's the case or not? There doesn't appear to be, of course, any signs on what appear to be the heads or anything that they would be part of a column. You would expect to see some kind of broken capitals above the head that would be supporting whatever structure. But if we're looking at this as some sort of example of a mud flood, it's very strange how these mud floods seem to behave, because of course all of this is on a big incline. We don't know where this mud might have come from, why it might have descended. We know nothing about the quality of the soil here. And again, as with so many purported archaeological sites, they tend to be quote-unquote discovered by certain dubious individuals or institutions, quote-unquote excavated by the same, and it's all tightly controlled. So I'm really not sure how this can be an example of anything that has any sort of good comparison with anything in a more civilized environment. And now he's going to start showing us pictures. Here's a problem with pictures, or the pictures that most of these supposedly disconnected characters show us. Really big, huge problem with the pictures. And I know that all of this has just become absolutely focused on looking at pictures, tell things weird. Looking at pictures, tell things weird. The problem with that is that looking at pictures doesn't give us any context at all. No context. Almost virtually all of them, with very few exceptions, they will pepper in very small exceptions where they will give proper citations, and not always very proper citations, because we don't always have year of, what was going on, context. Context. The problem with looking at pictures is there's no context. It's the same thing with what I was pointing out regarding the Bible and everybody knows by now my serious problems with the New Testament. What New Testament prophecy citations from the Old Testament, like for instance if you watch my last sponsored brief, you'll see the problem with it. It's out of context. Once we go back to that point and start contextualizing that quote, it all starts to fall apart. And none of these people, most specifically John Levi, are giving us context. Once in a while, we'll get a little bit of context, but in this video, and in most videos, we tend to get zero context whatsoever. Now, John begins by showing us a picture that he said he took of some sort of construction, renovation, whatever, of a Mormon temple, and he notes how there are these levels that are under grade, levels that are below grade, or whether or not they're below grade, what they are is foundation. These are foundation levels. It is not a crazy or controversial thing to have levels below grade or foundational levels partly below grade. That's just something that is a very normal thing to do in building construction. For one thing, you take advantage of what footprint you have for any given structure, and you go below ground. If he thinks it's strange that there are, as he puts it, doorways here and doorways here, I would counter and say there's nothing strange about that at all. For one thing, it has been part of IRC, which is International Residential Code, and Commercial Code follows most of these too, and they can vary depending on the zoning and the purpose of the structure. Now, if he wants to argue that it's been repurposed, so some things are odd, based on what they say the original intent and purpose were, based on the construction narrative, that's fine. Go ahead and do that. But to say that this demonstrates a mud flood or some kind of burial of a civilization is absurd. It's patently absurd. Because it makes all the sense in the world to have below grade levels. Typically, if you have a single below grade level, you are always going to have some kind of egress, especially if people will either be living or spending a good deal of time down there. If you're finishing out this below grade level, to this day, International Code stipulates that you have to have a certain amount of spaces for egress, including doors. Doors in underground levels that lead to the outside in some way, shape, or form. Whether that is a sort of quasi-underground alleyway like you'll see in a number of cities, where the people who are living below ground level can walk out their door, go through an alley, hit a stairs, and get out, up to the street. That's just common sense. It's good building sense. So you're going to see doors all the time in levels below grade. Well, what about this door? What about this door underneath this level? Well, first off, we don't have enough context, again, to know what the design, the floor plan, and intended uses were for this building. One of the things these people never do is give us a good picture of the inside, like a really good understanding of the insides of these buildings. Now, for one thing, there are plenty of buildings, especially in more urban environments, that will have tunnels. Tunnels are good ways for people to go from the building to a lot of different places. They could be going to, let's say that this building was originally built for government purposes. And I mean, what the heck? If we're talking about a Mormon temple, then it was, and we could even believe the narrative, then it was built for government purposes. And you would have a tunnel, a subterranean tunnel that would lead you to somewhere else, another building. I know of a number of them in a number of different towns near me, where there are these tunnels that are built from one government building to another government building. Happens all the time. It's not weird. It's not controversial. So if he needs a reason for there to be, there's no doorway shown here. It's a tunnel. If he needs a reason for a tunnel, there's a reason for a tunnel. If he needs a reason for a door or an opening that's subgrade here, there's your reason. Egress. People need to get in and out of subgrade levels and buildings. Next, he moves on to this infamous shot, which has been featured by so many different characters in this mud flood game. He says he thinks it's New York, New Jersey, something like that. No, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be in Seattle. And I think the way you can mark it is these certain radio towers in the back. I spent some time, maybe a year ago, looking all over this neighborhood where this would sort of have to be to try to find this street and this particular excavation and construction project, and came up entirely empty-handed. Besides for the fact that this photo absolutely looks doctored. Look at this. This, all this right here, this overburden, or where they haven't yet excavated, we could say. Look at what it looks like. You see those smears? You see all that photoshopping junk there, and how posterized all of this area is, so that you can't make out how this is not an organic, natural photograph. There's all of that. Okay? All of this, we don't know exactly where all of this came from. This, for all we know, was the side of some kind of a factory or something that was simply taken from there. It was cut out. It was superimposed onto a street view of this downtown. And voila. Oh my gosh. We have all of these buried floors underneath this street. One of the problems, of course, when you look closely at this, is the level of the street and the level of the curb of the sidewalk right here. Then the level of the windows of this structure, which would mean, look at the window here, look at the window here, and figure about how far up from this window would have to be at least the next level, which I guess we would have to assume would be the roof, or if not, just another level where you would have all of the horizontal trusses and concrete work that would be set into the ceiling of this floor, which would allow for objects as heavy as cars to be parked on top of something like this without it all caving in. And that's assuming that a residential dwelling would even have floors, ceilings that would be designed and constructed in a manner strong enough to, for instance, hold all of these cars on top of it. I call total bullshit on this one. Again, out of context. Out of context. Besides him being wrong as far as where it was supposed to be taken, again, out of context. No citation. Here's another one of my favorites out of context. There's nothing remotely weird about what we're looking at this picture, besides the fact that we don't know exactly where this is, exactly when it was taken. There's really nothing remotely odd about this picture, other than the fact that we're not being able to look at the inside. Are there a few oddities about this? Maybe, but what's not odd about it is these doors. Not odd. The reason that you have, for instance, that you have international code, and most builders around the world adhere to these standards, is because they're common sense. They make sense. This is all residential. Obviously, it looks like it's built for people to live in. So when it was originally built, you would have had doors down here for the people living in the lower levels to exit. Even if they were meant to be emergency exits. Now, A lot of them point out, well, why do you have all of these windows below ground level? Well, lots of reasons you'd want windows below ground level, and international code states that you have to have a certain amount of space around all of these windows. You have to have space around these doors. Why would you want that? For a lot of reasons. If you've got someone living below ground, you don't want to deprive them of either sunlight or fresh air. As we can see, these windows are constructed in a way that they're casements. These are casements. Even though somebody did some remodeling and put some mesh over them, they're still casements. They were built in the first place to open out so that whoever was inhabiting this space could get sunlight and air. If you're going to live below grade, you need to let in the air and you need to let in plenty of sunlight so it doesn't get too damp, it doesn't stay too dark. The only reason you'd want damp and dark conditions if you were using it for like a root cellar or a wine cellar, or if you were just using it for storage and it didn't matter too much if you got certain types of spores that might develop in the darkness, then it's okay. But if you're going to have either people living in there or if you're going to be using it for storage of things that you want to stay dry and you don't want little spores and other things to grow, then you have to let in air and sunlight. You use space below grade in order to increase the value of your property. You now have far more square footage, but you can only go so far down and still make that space inhabitable. That's why you're typically going to just see one, because you can't make people live in spaces where there's no windows and there's no egress. It all makes perfect sense. The only questions there are is, why at some point in time did someone decide to do certain things regarding remodeling? Like all of this stuff that you're seeing all along the front of this building, that's where they would have been putting in the sidewalk. Because what was common in towns is that you would put in a sidewalk on slabs and they would literally just sit on these brackets. You would have all this space then underneath, which could be used for mechanical. That would be after the fact. In the first place, these were probably built with large window boxes and stairwells leading to the original sidewalk, but a lot of cities have greatly expanded their sidewalks. They cover these things up, and there's usually still a large cavity down under here, which the city or other contractors use as mechanical access. It's nothing controversial. Then he moves on to one of Drusenin's favorites and one of like a lot of people's favorites. And by the way, there have been people, and I've called out channels and other platforms which have used photoshops of this whole area and these windows on other structures to try to prove mud flood. It's so damned dishonest. But this right here, I'm going to take as fine. This is the Russian Polytechnic Museum. Apparently, a certain amount of work is being done, so they're excavating down to do a certain amount of work. Now, when we look at this Russian Polytechnic Museum, we are not getting the inside shots of all of this space here. We don't really get to see over here the inside shots of this space here, so that we can do what? Contextualize. We need to contextualize the structure, meaning inside and out. So why on earth would we be seeing something that clearly, okay, well, clearly this area here was underground, but clearly we have these giant windows that also seem to extend underground. Well, that's true, but right below this, we clearly have footings. We clearly have footings. Footings for the building. Footings for the building. Big old slab. Now, do they have more levels underground here? Do they have tunnels going to other buildings and stuff? Maybe they do. Again, not weird, not crazy, not controversial. But why would there be these giant windows, and then, look, clearly that's ground level, clearly that's ground level, that's ground level, and oh, here we've got an arch and a bricked up window. Well, that's strange, and he points out how strange that is that there would be a bricked up, what appears to be, based on what we're seeing right here below it, would appear to be a bricked up window. My goodness, why would that be? Well, for a few reasons. One, if we could actually see the inside. My guess is, now I could be wrong, but there could be a number of reasons for this, like reasons that aren't controversial, perfectly logical reasons. My assumption is when you go inside these doors, there is probably a staircase right past these doors. And you're going to have stairs and landings that go up. You're going to have some light that comes in from this arch transom window. Maybe you're going to get up to this level right here, and you're going to have a big old window, and you're going to go up some more stairs and another level and probably have a window up there. Okay? But since it's a museum, it probably has certain spaces that span a couple of normal size floors so that they can exhibit large things or just have really large spaces. Now, if that's the case, they'd also have a stairway leading down here to this level, and right here is probably a window that they had just like these windows for the stairs that would shine some light in there. And at a certain point in time, they might have decided they were doing other kinds of things with the space out here, and they wanted it all bricked up. Didn't need the window there when you came down the stairs. Wouldn't have been required necessarily in code either, because it likely wasn't used at any point in time as an egress, so they really didn't need it for that. And they might have found that it was a better use of space to just block it up. They probably figured they didn't need it. There was probably a platform out here with stairs elsewhere, and they might have just decided they didn't need it. Or it could have been egress underneath whatever the platform was here, and they just decided that since they put an egress somewhere else, which fell within code, they just did not need this anymore and bricked it up. Not weird. Now, when you would get downstairs, there might be, but we don't know because they're not showing us all of the floor plans or the inside views, probably large rooms over here. And they would want a lot of light coming in to showcase whatever it was that they had in this big space in here. Thus, the windows that would extend all the way down, and then they would have large wells outside of that, which would let in light. They could probably open certain panels, let in air, and it's not weird, it's not strange, it's not mud flood, it's not burial. There's nothing wrong with this. So the next offensive image that he brings up is this, completely out of context. Where is it, John? What's up above this? What's over here? What's over here? What's down here? What can we see in this image? We see what appears to be remnants of brick all around, remnants of brick here, rubble all around. And because it appears like it is or once was below grade, which is hard to tell what it was because it's so close up, we don't have any we have zero context whatsoever. We see that someone apparently bricked it up inside of here. We don't know what size this is. Can we put a ruler or a yardstick on here somewhere so we can get a sense of scale? Because looking at this, we have really no sense of scale. We don't know what this is. We don't know that these were just a couple of windows that were built in whatever this structure is, that had some wells out here for light and air, which is totally normal. And that it wasn't just, if it was truly buried under earth, that it wasn't just buried at one time because they blocked it up because they were no longer using it for human habitation, did not need the light, did not need the air. How do we know that this isn't attached to some building, like an industrial building, and these weren't large coal chutes? We don't know. Why don't we know? Because he's not giving us any context. And just for some proof, even though they keep saying they don't, try to keep beating the same terms into our heads over and over again. Here you go. It's right in the video. The mud flood. And he shows us mud. Bloop, 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 everywhere. And then he goes right on just after this to say, but we're not trying to use the same terminology to push the same narrative. It's just a term. I mean, it's totally benign. But it's not. And it is the same. They're all using the same terminology in a mockingbird way, all reading from the same script. And then he just throws a picture like this at us. And these guys, they do this all the time. To just like, I guess, wow us with an image, no context whatsoever. And there's, of course, all kinds of problems with this picture besides the fact of, well, where the heck is this? When was it taken? By whom? What's the elevation? What's the water table there? You know, there's all of that we don't have, besides the fact, well, what the heck is this? What is this object? Over here, this is supposed to be like the side of whatever, like dirt was sheared away from this column. And then we have, what is this shape overlapping this column, like somebody forgot to erase it there so you could see the rest of the column. And this column, of course, doesn't even look like it fits in the rest of the... What's going on behind there? I have no idea. I have no idea. And furthermore, based on the scale and where this wall of dirt should stop, if this was being excavated in any sort of a sensible way at all, they would have to put up supports. They'd have to be supporting all of this so that it didn't just cave in. You can't just have... All right, look, the little guys doing little projects have to make sure that they don't have vertical walls like this sitting unsupported. So is this supposed to be some kind of professional excavation? Because if so, there's no signs of it anywhere. What's this guy doing? Who knows? What's he holding? Who knows? Is that a shovel? I don't know. What's at the bottom of it? Who knows? Completely out of context. And nothing about it looks right. Same thing with this photo. It was just like that one purportedly from Seattle, where we appear to have all of these, they look sort of like tunnels. They could be. There's plenty of subterranean spaces that are all built with arches because they're very strong and have a number of chambers or tunnels around them, oftentimes used for really just mechanical, as far as diverting wastewater or rainwater out of them. Happens all the time. One of the big problems with this is we're not given enough space above these to believe that you could actually put all of these heavy things on top of whatever might have already been there in the first place. At best, your headers are above these arches, and then you need some sort of floor that consists of a number of horizontal trusses, typically with concrete poured in the horizontal trusses, reinforced, and we don't even have enough space to see something like that. Again, it is the easiest thing in the world to take this from somewhere else, Photoshop it right in, especially when you don't provide the context. Where was it taken? Who was it taken by? When was it taken? What's the deal? Nothing. It's looky pictures, say stuff weird. Looky pictures, say stuff weird. I looked for this Parison Images, can't find it. He actually suggests in the video that there's more levels below it, like this pile of earth is a level, which I'm not sure that I understand that either. Same thing here. He points out a building, no context. Obviously this is downtown, so it is commercial. At one point in time, there could have been people spending a lot more time in the lower levels. So they had windows and light in there. And again, sidewalks are so often brought to the buildings. They put supports in. They put these concrete slabs over top. And then cavities are left below for easy access of all kinds of mechanical to be run outside of the building, but easily accessible so that it can all be worked on. The fact that these were bricked up is nothing. It's not even controversial at all. At one point in time, they probably had these little wells outside of them. One of these may or may not have been an egress door. Obviously, there was a certain amount of remodeling that's been done on this building, but there's nothing weird about this at all. Like, at all, at all. Another picture out of context, which he showed us right after the Sphinx, and I'm not even getting into the Sphinx. It's a whole other rabbit trail right there. And we got a couple of guys here in what is this? Turkish garb, Egyptian garb. Looks like a map painting behind them. Look at that. Now look at this. What is this? This little null tell, top till with the pretty little tree. This looks like a map painting. And we got what looks like 3 guys standing here posing for a picture with what appears to be these columns below. Are these supposed to be the same column that the guy was standing in front of in the other picture? Well, if that's the case, and they're trying to tell us that these are buried structures, temples, whatever, and these were like support columns, and that all of this is mud that flooded in, where on earth are the supports for all of this? Because it is not going to just stay freestanding when it's been sheared almost vertically like that, with boulders up here applying pressure. They're applying pressure, and that pressure is going to push outward. These are all going to collapse. All right? If this really was somewhere at some time, these guys would be some of the dumbest guys to be standing anywhere near this. I would not come near that. And the whole point to what I'm saying here is that all of this is remarkably suspicious. No context, and everything about the photo itself, including the map painting back here. What is this? What is this? Seriously. Map painting back here is all suspicious. This will be the last one that I'm going to focus on, last image in his video. And it's probably like, there's 7 minutes left in his video. You know what? You can watch the rest and just apply some common sense to this. Notice how that he's not giving us enough good context to come to proper conclusions on anything. Now this right here, what is this supposed to be? Like an old church? Kind of looks like an old church. There could be a number of reasons. For one thing, let's say that this was underground. Well, where is it at? Well, we're not sure exactly where it's at. But say that this little part here was underground. Okay, maybe looks like solid foundation walls. Was it lifted at one point in time and these other things were put in under it? I don't know, because I don't have any context. I don't even know that all of this whole thing right here that we're looking at, wasn't just photoshopped in. Look at this, what's supposed to be dirt right here, leaned up against here. You can see how it's smeared against the brick. You see that? You see how it's smeared against the brick by someone doing editing in some program that's like Photoshop. Though I think that they have more sophisticated ways of editing things and have had for a very, very, very long time. Okay, we've got this ladder that's inexplicably leaned up against here in some weird way. I would never climb that ladder, not placed against whatever this is in this way. It doesn't even make sense. Like a parallelogram-y looking ladder. Is this supposed to be a sheer side of the earth here? Again, this is all going to collapse if somebody doesn't support it. All this earth is going to collapse if it's not supported. There's no way in the world. And this building is probably what? Where is it at? It's supposed to be in America somewhere. As soon as the rains start coming or whatever, it's all going to collapse. Makes no sense whatsoever. No one would have any brains taking all this down like this, and no supports. We got a railroad tracks running along there so that we believe what exactly? The railroad tracks seem to actually be pieced into this, and the reason for it is because this cart over here has a wheel that's so far down that it doesn't follow the even grade that a railroad track has to follow, as far as its timbers and the bed and the tracks. So much about this image doesn't make any sense. Where's this guy's head at? Where's this guy's head? Has he got like a pinhead here or something? All these heads are below this line right here. What's this line right here? That's the footers. That's the footers of this building. What is this down here? This is a bunch of stuff that could never support all this up here. I have a serious problem believing that any of this stuff down here exists, period. Here's your footers. They're built to support all this weight going up vertically. What's this down here? If they put this on top of whatever the hell this is down here, what? Oh, they've got a couple of lolly columns in there? I don't care. I do not care. There's your footers. Footers are put in at the base of a building for all the foundations and upper walls to sit on. I have serious problems believing this, and since there's no context, and since the dirt over here looks smeared, and since everything else looks out of place, and since this guy over here, what is this even a guy? He looks like he was painted in here. They are selling you a load of BS. A load of BS. None of it adds up. And I don't mean in the sense where they say, looky picture, this is weird, it doesn't add up. No. What they're showing you and what they're trying to make you believe doesn't add up. Do I not believe there were civilizations in America, in Europe, in other countries of the world for a long time? Of course I do. Of course I do. But they're presenting you with ideas that don't add up. This whole mud flood idea, why would they do it? Again, when we get back to the why, there can be a number of reasons because we don't have the advantage of understanding exactly the purposes to their design. But I would say if one reason, because they have these other underlying narratives where they want people to believe that there were these worldwide cataclysms. And that's why they want to show you examples of mud flood all around the world. There were worldwide cataclysms, as opposed to the narrative that I've been finding in all the digging that I do, which is that the Bible and Bible events were far, far closer to our day than we had ever imagined. And there weren't any worldwide catastrophes or cataclysms, but that the people that finally got hegemony over just about all the nations of the world, because there was probably so much infighting amongst these people who wanted to control specifically North America, and the amazing amount of concentrated, abundant resources in North America, they decided to form a confederacy of nations, clans, tribes ruling over everything. And the only way they figured that they could keep all of this intact was to change the narrative about everything. The narrative that America was once a wide open space, only peopled by these certain red Indian peoples, they tell us, or maybe some other, what they say were indigenous or natives. The idea that colonization from Europe only started happening in the last few hundred years. Christianity itself supplies them with tons of ammunition for a long, long time since the events of the Old Testament happened. However, if you start looking into the Christian narrative, which I have in earnest for a long time now, which is why Hannah and I have been working on an English translation of the falsification of the history of early Christianity. That narrative, which is another thing that none of these people attack, which they should, if they're sincere and they're really looking for the truth, they should. That gives us this huge gap of time in which they can work their magic. If you take that Christian and New Testament narrative away, we're left with those last few books of Ezra, Nehemiah, Zechariah, and Haggai before another empire called Yun was going to take over what Paris and Mede had, their holdings in the land and likely in the world, parts of the world. This new nation was going to come in, Yun. They were going to practice, according to Daniel 8, they were going to practice deception. They were going to rule by deception, and not their own armies, their own strength, but other armies, like bringing in other people and creating problems between people group, races, ethnicities, religions, politics. It's exactly what they do. And I think that there was probably so much warring between them and other great empires at the time, or pretenders to the throne, that they developed this confederacy. And in order to solidify their hegemony, they had to re-educate a few different generations, which to educate a generation, it only takes you about 10 or 12 years. So you could do this in about 30 years or so, which is likely all of those very mysterious years prior to World War II. World War II was pretty much about the end, and they have been building and solidifying their new world sense only since the 40s. Only since the 40s. Because they had such control over what information people had, and they likely had introduced their new languages many decades before. It doesn't take that long to do this stuff, folks. It doesn't take that long to do this stuff. And that's what all the evidence points to. Not these great worldwide cataclysms and catastrophes that buried all kinds of things in mud. There's far better, far more reasonable explanations for these apparent phenomenon that all these people traveling in lockstep, speaking as mockingbirds, try to tell us. They're misleading us. At best, they're naive. At worst, they are malicious. And I'm simply trying to make videos like this to help you, so that we can get on the right track and start seeing what is most likely true and what is most likely false. So with that, I'm not going to take up any more time in this video other than to please ask you, if you're watching this, to take a look at the end screen I'm going to put on, which are the ways that you could help me. And there are a lot of different ways you can that involve you getting something back. I've done this very deliberately because I want to give you as much as I can. But in order to do what I do, I need to make money doing it. And that's just a fact. So I appreciate you joining me, and I hope you'll consider supporting me and my work in one of the various different ways that you can. And with that, I will see you in the next one.